Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-host, attorney Sonia Madison. How you doing, Sonia?
I woke up like, all right, let's get this going. And then I pulled on social media and found out Michaela DePrince passed. I don't know if you know her, but
I don't know her.
she was a black ballerina, 29, passed at 29, so
Oh,
young.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Young people die too. How did she die?
It hasn't been reported, the cause of death. So
Okay.
I take it the family, is probably maybe doing an autopsy or maybe they just don't want to reveal it yet. But if you don't know her, because you don't, but if other people listening are curious, watch First Position. She was featured there, and she's been featured alongside Misty Copeland. I'm sure you know her. But yeah, it was sad to hear, but nonetheless.
Yeah, I don't know anybody. I don't keep up with popular figures, pop culture, I was just not.
Well, this is ballet. Look at you, pop culture like it's well. So then you don't know about the Beyonce snub for the CMAs? You didn't keep up
I
with
have
this?
no knowledge of that. I don't pollute my brain with such information. I like to keep it holy. It's
Yeah, look at you. But this is supposed to be your area. You're in Nashville. You do music, and you didn't hear about Beyonce, Cowboy Carter getting snubbed by the CMAs.
no, I didn't know anything about that. So do tell what happened there.
Well, the CMAs, I guess, pretty much put out their list of nominees for all the various categories. And we know how successful Cowboy Carter was. It continues to be. It was on the Billboard charts, number one, I'm sure, for weeks. And not one song or
Hmm.
feature was nominated. And so a lot of people, of course, are calling foul. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you've heard one of the reasons why she did the album, or at least some people say it's because the CMAs were so disrespectful to her when she performed with, I believe, the Dixie Chicks, or she just had a previous performance there and felt as if, they just weren't welcoming to her. And so with that, she, started making plans to do a country album, and here we have it.
Oh wow.
Um, so
So it went. Well, I'm sure it's pretty a closed society. That Country Music Association is a pretty close society, and I think if you're like just dabbling in country music, they're not likely to give you
look at you.
much accolades.
Beyonce was just dabbling in there.
This is her first country album. Whether she wanted to do that in the past all along or what, but this is the first one.
But even if you're dabbling, if it's successful, I mean, if you not acknowledging someone's success, don't we usually call that hating? Or are we
Well,
just
I mean, we have the same issue within the gospel music arena, whether Kanye West should be celebrated as a gospel music artist or Snoop Dogg or something like that. Should they get gospel awards because they're not gospel artists? And even though they may have appeared or been featured on a gospel song that was popular, or may have had a foray into gospel music, doesn't necessarily mean that it should be honored by the society, especially for just poking your head in and getting right back out.
yeah, I hear that, but at the same time, I mean, to me, you purposely snubbed her because you knew this was pretty much the number one album. And you had to purposely decide not to
Mm.
list any, but they have categories like best new artist, they have categories like best song. So even to your point about Kanye and whatnot, I mean, there have been artists who have been nominated for their songs. And where there's American Music Awards, where there's Billboard Awards. I mean, if their song did well, you acknowledge the song. Now, again, you know, I just think it was a snub, but I hear you in trying to defend the CMAs, but that's
I'm
not what
not trying to defend at all. I'm just saying, hey, this is a possibility. This could have been something that's been going on. So,
said, no, she's just dabbling. Take her out. You had to bring her up. To me, you couldn't ignore it.
hey,
Um,
it can happen. It can happen.
but
So,
Cat Williams said that this year was going to be a year of reckoning, and we've got another lawsuit against Diddy that came out as
oh,
well.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Don't
my.
mention just some little legal stuff that happened. But yeah, Don Richards, who was one of the members of making the band, and I guess maybe also had a solo or whatever with Diddy. is suing him. And one of the allegations is that during a dinner, he slapped Casey or Cassie, I may be saying her name wrong, in front of Neo and Usher and some other heavy hitters, and they all just continued to eat their meal. And so there's been a lot of buzz on social media.
I'm going to say that using the word heavy hitters, other heavy hitters was a poor choice of words at that point. Because P. Diddy could, in that context, be considered a heavy hitter too.
Well, again, it's the fact that it was done in front of them, I'd imagine to some degree maybe there's this strategy to push him to settle, because I know he hasn't really settled a lot since settling for the Cassie lawsuit, and maybe I'm sure she's like, well, maybe if I throw in some names in which these people now have to respond. Because I think Usher is on tour, so I'd imagine he's in front of some media even as we speak, and whether something brings that up, but I'm sure there's a strategy to that. But I also, again, we talked about this back when we had Taj George on there. There needs to be some conversations about people who watch the abuse and just continue to eat their meal. But there's also been people saying, well, Usher also suffered under Diddy, so maybe he still was a victim.
Yeah.
You're like, no comment.
The truth will eventually be revealed one way. I don't, I like to say that truth would be revealed, but I don't necessarily have the confidence that truth will be revealed. It's just a matter of what we accept as truth to be revealed.
Which, okay, well, before we get into then the debate, speaking of truth.
Right. Because as an attorney, I'm sure it's not what's true, but what you can prove.
Well, and sometimes, lie becomes the truth, depending on who's spreading it. I did want to ask you about the Dolphins quarterback, Twa, and I can't say his last name, but he last night sustained a concussion, and I think he's had two or at least three previously.
At least
yeah.
three.
And you're in the medical field. A lot of people are saying, hey, the Miami should force him to retire. His family should force him to retire. But then there are other people saying, that's his decision or just a decision between him and his family. But from a medical standpoint, just from what because I know that this isn't necessarily your expertise, but at the same time, I'm sure you can understand or at least articulate what happens in concussions in the brain and how it could lead to, I guess, further injuries.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's not my area of expertise. so take whatever information I share with a grain of salt. But so concussion is really just on that whole spectrum of traumatic brain injuries. Some injury occurs to the skull and or the shifting of the brain within inside the cranial cavity, or either direct contusion to the brain will cause some injury to it. And of course, these high impact contact sports like football are notorious for having these concussions, and then not only just having immediate sequela, but later on down the road, and later in life, having serious cognitive issues as a result of it. And so it's always this question about, should even children be able to play contact football sports? Because if you start this injury fairly early, where children's brains don't necessarily fill the entire cranial cavity. And so there's much more room for shift injuries, same thing that you get or similar to what you would get in an infant with the shaken baby syndrome. But so there's a question about whether or not children should be even participating in these. But there's one thing that's for certain, is that the biggest risk factor for getting another concussion or getting a concussion is a history of previous concussions. And so if you've had like 3 concussions, I think the probability of you getting another concussion is elevated like 30 times.
Oh, wow.
30 times higher risk of getting another concussion. And that's he's already had like 3 times already, at least 3 times. There was one time. Yeah, there was one time when they said that they didn't call it a concussion, but he had every symptom that probably should have been called one. So at this point, he's now at 30 times more likely to have another concussion. And I think it is time to have that really hard conversation. I don't know what kind of liability the team or the NFL might have for allowing and or encouraging or whatever language you might want to use these athletes to go back out onto the field. after having an injury. Now, the reality is that what's supposed to happen, I think, is there's supposed to be like two independent neurologists that are on the field for each time you have a game. And so if they identify any of these signs of a concussion, they're supposed to, not be able to play again, at least not for the rest of that game. They're supposed to be taken out. And those things, of course, loss of consciousness is one of them. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. But confusion, amnesia, seizures, and now I think even as a result of one of Tua's prior injuries, they started adding in some of these other signs of it. And one of which was you can see this even on his most recent injury the other day. It's
I was gonna,
called
if you
huh?
saw, I was going to ask if you saw how it played out.
I didn't see how it played out. Friends and I were at the sports bar. It was on. We were watching the game, but we were talking. I missed the actual injury though, so I think all of us mixed it because we were talking. But of course, you see it on replay, and what happens is that he falls down. When he falls down, you can see he's got the football on one hand with his arms sort of flexed, but the other hand just goes up straight up in the air like this, and that's called a fencing response. And if for whatever reason the brain just assumes that fencing position, one arm is flexed and the other one is extended. And even if something like that is witnessed, that person's supposed to be taken off the field, or if they just have unstable walk or what they call ataxia. So all of those things indicate that the player should not play the rest of the game. And then they have to go through this 5-phase recovery thing in order to be able to get back into the game. If at any one of those phases they don't meet the criteria, they start developing additional symptoms, even so much as a headache, while gradually, progressively increasing the amount of exposure to their athleticism and training and playing. If they even so much as get a headache, it pushes them back to an earlier phase. And so they can't get back onto the field until they have met these other type of criteria. But my own personal opinion is that it probably should be a 3 strikes and you're out.
Then you're like, get 3 concussions. And then
3 concussions and you're out. You're out of there. The reality is, I don't know how big of a deal he just recently signed a big deal though, didn't he? I mean, so he's going to be able to
probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be well taken care of afterwards, even if he did retire. But then there's that whole issue about, I'm in it for the love of the game too, for the love of the sport. And at some point, you got to love your family, love your health a little bit more than you love the game, especially if you got the money in your pocket.
The question for him is, because I know Stephen A. was pretty much talking about men, we sacrifice. And so, I mean, for him, this would be like tearing him apart because he's sacrificing his life to ensure that he has money for his kids and all this. And if he just loved the sport so much and it's supporting and providing for his family, then if he's okay with that sacrifice, that's what men are. And one of the female commentators said, first of all, women bear children, so we sacrifice our bodies too. But again, and what she said is similar to what you're saying. She was still like, but I just think he needs to have this conversation with his family because perhaps your wife and children would prefer that you do not sacrifice your health just to ensure that, there's this amount of money coming in.
I mean, you get the same issue with boxing though. I mean, you got, how much more contusions and trauma can you take to the head than with boxing? But yet people still get back in that ring, and how much should we as a people really embrace the barbarism of watching someone destroy their lives in front of us? You might as well go live on a suicide thing, on a suicide attempt. Just go live stream. And the reality is that if somebody goes live on, killing themselves and announce that at this time they're going to go live and kill themselves, you probably have hundreds of thousands of people viewing that live. And I'm not sure what that says about us as humanity. I mean, ask Shannon.
I was going to say, you got me thinking about Shannon, and boy, that was... there's still I still do not understand. And again, I'm not trying to accuse him of lying, but I'm like, it takes a couple of steps to get to your Instagram and then to hit live.
Right.
And to say those steps happen immediately after you drop the phone. I don't know, but I don't know. But there are people that are like, well, he got some more views. Like his ratings went up
Yeah.
after what happened.
And they've been talking about him all week long. There are memes and everything around it, but the reality is that there's bad publicity is still publicity, and so you still get elevated. Plus, I think he had something to prove, though.
See, that's the thing that
All
I
the
don't get.
other
Why does
rumors.
he have something to prove?
Well, all the rumors surrounding, people saying that he gay. I guess he
So
figured,
again,
let
you
me
don't
show
need to
you.
prove what you don't need to prove to the people that you're gay or straight. I mean,
I
people are
guess he
gonna say
felt
what
like he
they feel
did.
about
He got a
it.
brand. He has a brand, so he has to protect
Whatever.
that brand. So
People are going to believe it. Look what you say. Bad publicity is okay. Okay, well, they believe you gay. If that's bad publicity, you got some publicity.
well,
I mean, you don't
that
need to prove
depends. It depends on
anything.
how you want your brand to be recognized. So that.
But
But
again, I would now you want your brand to be associated with you going live having sex on
well,
Instagram.
for some guys that's machismo, and so you're like,
Well, that's
hey,
why then that's why I asked if he says he's remorseful on accident. Well, if that's true,
yeah.
then that's your brand.
Yeah, well, now he's in recovery mode. First thing he did was post that thing. He was like, "Someone hacked my account. We're
Yeah, he lied first.
vigorously working to figure this out."
And everyone's like, we hear your voice.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. Did ESPN do anything with him on that?
Well, there
There's
have
some
been
discussion about that.
they've not fired him, and some people are upset that he didn't get fired or whatnot. But as far as I'm concerned, there has not been any repercussions.
What do you think? Should there be?
I mean, for me as an employment attorney, oftentimes you have a step process. So you get that warning, you get that second warning, you maybe get the final warning and whatnot. And I also don't know how they've handled other situations that maybe are similarly egregious or maybe not, I guess, depending on the perspective, like you said.
What do you think? They don't think it's egregious? Oh, thank God he recovered.
I would hope that they at least give him a warning saying, okay, you said this was an accident. Now you need to put up some boundaries to ensure it doesn't happen again. If it happens again, we're going to consider that a little bit more intentional. So I would imagine they at least did that.
That seems a little bit more reasonable to me. Look at that. You're saying something that sounds reasonable to me. I can't believe it. We're starting this day off right.
You're finally acknowledging what's reasonable.
It's charity. I can claim it on my taxes.
Which, I mean, speaking of, and what started perhaps as laugh and funny has now turned way too serious. So we have this Springfield woman, and her name is Erica Lee, because I'm going to call her out, who posted on Facebook about a harmful and baseless claim alleging Haitian immigrants are eating local pets. And she has now since come out and said, I regretted it. I didn't realize it would just spread it to what it is, but it has leaked into the debate stage. And so, and he was fact checked on it. But what did you think of the debates?
It was what I expected. Every bit of what I expected.
Did you expect him to say they're eating cats and dogs? I was like,
I expected him to say something lunatic or whatever, lunatic.
lunacy. I get it.
Yeah, I expected a whole bunch of lunacy from him, and he did not disappoint on the amount of lunacy that he actually spread generously.
How did you feel about Lindsay Davis and David Muir?
So I get how people were saying, they were 3-1. They say that the debate was 3-1 and that the moderators were harder on Trump than they were on Kamala. Here's the reality. Now, off the rip, they asked Kamala a question, and Kamala did not answer that question about the economy or whatever. And so and her first response, I was like, you need to answer the question. That was my first response right off the rip. But I don't know that as a moderator, I'm going to start the whole debate off very antagonistic. As we get into it and you demonstrate a propensity to be evasive and or to just flat out tell lies, then I'm going to lose my tolerance of your evasiveness and or your lies, bottom line. So I'm going to start calling you out on it. And so I think it happened more with Trump. From the moderators, they were a little bit more involved with Trump because Trump was not answering any questions. And if he did answer a question, he would color it with lies. And I'm like, we can't let that just hang out there. So we had to do that. There's one, I think CNN counted something like 30 lies or something that he may
33
have
to
told.
1, which I mean, we
And
know
she had one.
yeah, a little
Yeah.
biased there, but I mean, hey.
Yeah.
But
But
it wasn't
but I
like
still want to find out the other lies that some of the more conservative media said that she told. Of course they said that she lied about the people in Afghanistan to withdraw, and now that there's nowhere around the globe where there's U.S. soldiers involved in active
West
combat.
military and combat zones, yeah.
Yeah. And that's true. Now I don't know whether that was a lie or if that was a misspeaking. I don't know if she was trying to say any American initiated wars or anything like that. But
Well, and I know a lot of people have been, I guess, parsing the word combat zone, because they're saying, well, there are troops that are still deployed, but they're not in combat areas.
right.
And again, I don't, because then there are some people say, well, yeah, they are. And so to your point, I think some of those words are ambiguous enough to someone may say, oh, true, and someone may say false. They also, because I did try to look up, and that was one. And then the other one was when she said that Trump had the worst unemployment rate since the Great Depression. And according to ABC News, the worst unemployment rate was 14.8% in April 22, but when he left office, it was down to 6.4. And the worst since the Depression was in 2009, and it was about 10%. So again, depending on how you,
Yeah.
he'd leave you with the worst. Well, it was at 6.4. That wasn't the worst. But
Right.
now, did the worst peak during his presidency? Yes. So.
And even still, some people say it didn't mean the depression, but she should meant the Great Recession or whatever. And people make excuses and they start tolerating, excusing, apologizing for some words that people say in a debate. And I get it. You're in a debate, you'll make some mistakes. The heat and the adrenaline that's running, you're inclined to misstate some things. But when you flat out tell
I was gonna
lies,
say,
moderators have to step in and say
yeah,
something.
because I think it depends on the not only the extremeness of the lie, but also the damage of the lie. Because as we are seeing when he said they're eating cats and dogs, you know how damaging that could be if you do not correct that. And we see it, we're seeing that played out in real time because
Right.
now we've got reports from people locally that are saying, hey, we had to evacuate schools, we had to evacuate some of the government, departments. And so you're seeing how harmful then that can be. And had that not been checked in real time, because it was over 60 million people that watched the
Right.
debate. Had that not been checked in real time, that people could have taken that as true.
It doesn't even matter that it was checked in real time. I saw friends of mine, posting about how atrocious it is now. Y'all people, we got to keep our eyes open, and you can believe that this stuff is not happening, but it's happening, and y'all pray for our country and everything. Like, are you? I mean, they were seriously engaged by this, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, the things that you believe, and is it plausible? Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it plausible? Absolutely not. Probably.
I
I
mean,
don't
I'm
think
not
so.
even gonna put it again. It's not happening. And so for him to put that out, knowing that it's a race whistle, knowing
Yeah.
how it, will start a lot of people that are, because we've seen this before. And I mean, you see it in Germany. You saw what happened when Nazis took over and start spewing the hatred of Jews using this type of rhetoric. So
Mm.
again, to let that go unchecked in real time, I think would have been dangerous. That was too extreme. I
Yeah.
know he was also fact checked on the abortion thing. He was saying that post birth abortions are happening, and I think Lindsey Graham said there's no state that permits you to kill a baby after birth. And I know a lot of people have been saying, well, they could allow the baby to die as if that is what an abortion is. But I'm like, it's too extreme. I mean, we're not going to sit here and act like women are killing their babies after they're born and that's legal,
Mm-hmm. Or like somebody wants it to be legal.
So I mean, those were the only two things that I really remember in real time. I know that I think it was reported by the BBC or somewhere else or maybe it was Fox, that it was at least 5 things. But those are the only things I remember. I know that they got on him about saying that he lost the election, but then he said, "No, I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. I never said I lost the election." And I know David kept pushing him and was like, "Well, I didn't take that as sarcasm, but hey, if
Right.
that's where you're going with it." Then also the FBI data saying that when he said that whole crime and violence is just out of control, and they said, "Well, the FBI has reported that crime has actually gone down."
Right. There was a couple of times when when he evaded the answer and they actually came back and asked him. So the question again was this. And so are you going to answer that? And I get it. That was the one time that I thought there was probably a little deferential or differential basically between Kamala, the way that they handled Kamala and the way that they handled Donald Trump is that they actually did go back and ask him. And frankly, from when I watched it, the only one question that she really just did not answer was that first question. And I do think that, to start it off pretty antagonistic, that's a judgment call. You're like, I'm just going to let this one slide. But if this keeps happening, then I'm going to call you on it.
I mean,
Fortunately
that's
for her, it
also
didn't keep
something
happening.
you expect that in debates. Do you really expect the candidates to answer the question, or do
No,
you
of course
expect
not.
them to go around it
Exactly.
and
That's the
point to their
point.
opponent, right?
That's the point. And but then there are some questions that you're like, we absolutely need an answer to this, and in that situation, you need to come back and say, this is a very important question. I need an answer to it.
As
And
long as there's some statements that, hey, I got to fact check you on that
yeah,
because you're just endangering too many people with this lie. I did want to get your thoughts on because I know a lot of conservative media are saying it relates to her changing some of her positions. And I think they really pointed out fracking. I think they brought up the whole, which the way they said it sounded so ridiculous. But they're saying that, well, she really did say that we are going to allow transgender surgeries on illegal immigrants, which when I looked at, because they said they were quoting this survey she did with the, I think the ACLU, and she said, she would support having using government resources for necessary, I guess, medical care for transgender individuals. Now, I can hear how you can take that and say, oh, she's saying you're going to have gender affirming surgery and all that. Okay, fine. But and I don't agree with that. I would not agree with using federal funds to allow someone and she didn't just say illegal immigrants. What she said was just general people in federal prisons. So just any person. But nonetheless, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, this is so extreme and ridiculous," and perhaps they could have fact checked her, but I don't think she ever denied it. I just think she just said, "This is so ridiculous. I'm not going to address it," and just
right.
moved on.
Well, but Trump could not get away with saying that with whether or not he would outlaw an abortion, a total ban on abortion if the bill came to his desk as president, because that was his argument. This is so outrageous. This has never happened, so I don't even need to answer this question. That this thing will never happen, and so they still continue to press him on that still.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there may have been a little bit of bias there, but I don't think it was unfair. I don't
Right.
think that there was unfair, and I don't even think that it was unwarranted. So you can't invoke or invite certain types of
Rhetoric.
scrutiny,
Yeah.
and then you can't invite that type of scrutiny and then cry foul because you're like, well, they're scrutinizing me. They wouldn't let me
And he
get
would
away with.
not double down on it. I mean, he just continued. They are, David, they're eating the cats and dogs. And you're just like, you won't let it up. I saw it on television. Did you see them kill a cat and eat it? Like, what are we
He's,
talking about?
he saw it on social media. They're posting about it everywhere. They're posting. And so that's the problem. I think is that, we wound up getting so much information that comes at us that it's hard to cipher what is the true information and should we be even really looking for information. How should we now process information? Because the title of the show today is liberating. Is information liberating or is it lethal? And I think information has a potential to be both of those, but the question is how much do we actually really need information? I was, as I was doing some of the research for my book, I was looking at it, I was thinking about it. Actually, this wasn't even part of the book though, but But there's so many things that are now coming out about what happened in the civil rights before civil rights movement was, and how blacks were mistreated, and cities were burned, or what's the Lake Lanier down in Atlanta. These
Yeah.
things are just recently coming up over, but they happened
Which used
decades
to be a
ago.
black city, which is probably what you're getting to. It used to be a black community that they've destroyed, and now it's now this big golf resort. But it used to be a black community. And that's again, it's an example of how much of our land was taken from us, and we are not getting any, I guess, reparations from the taking.
It's not just an example of that, but it's also an example of how that information has been buried and hidden from general discussion. You got people talking about they don't want to have certain discussions in school, about critical race theory issues, and certain historical facts to be brought up because they think that it's of no value. But then there's a lot of us who want to know. Like, I really want to know just how bad did y'all treat us? I want to know all the things that you all hid
And
from us.
surely you don't agree that it's not of unknown value. I mean, to me, if you don't understand history, you are doomed to repeat it. And that is what I feel like is happening. We are repeating some of history because people refuse to read it.
I just wonder how much of it do we actually need to know? How much of it, and what's the benefit of it? And I know people say if you ignore history, you're doomed to repeat it, but is that really true?
Yes.
I don't think that there are some things that will ever really repeat again in the country because we
You
have
say that,
become. I
but
do
we're
believe
about
that.
to elect a racist. I mean, and again, he's walking around with Laura Loomer and acted as if she has not only spewed 9/11 falsities, but also continues to spew racist rhetoric. And you're hanging out with this person and claiming, well, I mean, she supports me. I don't care about the other stuff. She supports me. Okay, that's what it takes. As long as you're supported, they can be racist and in your circle. So yeah, I do think we're turning the tables back.
Yeah, I just think that with things being so far above board now and so easily exposed now, there are things that happened in the past that will never happen again. Because the only reason they were able to persist in the past was because they could be concealed. And when other people really started finding out just how horrific some of the acts were, when it got exposed, then people started saying, "Oh no, we can't do that," and people started rising up and said, "We can't allow that to continue to happen." Now, granted, the wheels of change turned really slow, and the wheels of justice turned even slower. But it still happened. The change still occurred. Why? Because there was exposure brought to the situation, and as long as a thing can be remain hidden, it can be perpetuated. But when an
I
atrocity is
appreciate
revealed,
I appreciate your optimism. I disagree. I think it was exposed during their, I think slavery, I don't think anyone looked at slavery and said, oh, yes, they're treating them well. I think they saw how slaves were treated and did not care. And so it's the same thing again. We're going to spit out that Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs. And there are people continuously running with that rhetoric because they don't care.
the issue is who it's exposed to and what impact they have on you, and how they can impact your life. If it's exposed to people like mine, then yeah, it's not a big issue. But when it's exposed to people who would object, and those people who object can adversely impact you, particularly financially, then yeah, you start trying to hide those things, and or you wind up correcting the action. I'm trying to remember exactly. It was that was with the civil rights movement and the whole Bloody Sunday. That was the big thing about Bloody Sunday, was
Yeah,
that
so
it
it
finally
was,
got exposed to everybody else around there, in other parts of the country, and they said we can't let this thing continue to carry on like this, and so it got a lot more attention, and so as a result, it had to get resolved. Um, but the reason why I say that is because I look in the scripture. The Bible tells us that God created everything that God created in Genesis. After God created it, He looked at it and He said, "What? It is good." And so everything that He created afterwards, He said, "It is good." And then He created man. He put man in the middle of the garden, right? And He said, all this good that's around you, you can consume. There's one thing that you can't consume, and that's this tree in the middle of the garden. And it's you cannot eat its fruit. It's a tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so why would God not want them to eat from that tree? They already knew good. It wasn't that he didn't want them to know good. It was that he didn't want them to know evil. And so and so what happened was the way that Eve got tempted, and I know we like to talk about this so much, the way that Eve got tempted by Satan, by the serpent, was he said, God knows that once you eat from this tree, your eyes will be open and you'll know like he knows. And so the difference between what we know and what God knows is that God never intended for us to know evil. God only intended for us to know good. To know evil was supposed to be, I guess you can surmise that to know evil was supposed to only be within the realm of God. And God really intended to shield us from evil. But our quest to be more godlike calls us to want more information, to want to know more, and to be able to, and particularly to even know evil. I mean, I think, like we were talking about before, if somebody was watching, if people were watching, if somebody went live on their suicide attempt, how many people would tune in? And that's because we have, I think, this insatiable quest within us or thirst within us to know evil. And I don't think that we would ever rationalize it as such, but if evil is ever shielded from us, we're going to fight even more to uncover that evil. And I don't understand why we would do that necessarily, or even if it's helpful or if it's harmful to us.
So let me make sure I understand this, because you talked a lot. So, I don't want to misrepresent your point.
Thank you.
Are you suggesting that we should not know the evil history of whether that is our country or the world, or of people, what people have done in the history, because that will be harmful to us to know?
I'm saying that I want to know personally. Just let me go ahead and tell you, I personally want to
Well, I thought
know.
about one, because you made it very clear we do want to know, but I feel like you're
Yeah.
saying, but it is more harmful for us to know. And I want to make sure that if that is the point that you're making, then I want to make sure I refute it accurately. But if that is
I
the point you're making, I want to make sure I understand your point.
I am going to say, as a Christian, from an eternity standpoint, to know evil is not has never been our destiny and should not be our quest right now. Because from an eternal standpoint, evil is always going to be around us. Jesus told us, hey, evil's going to be here. And in fact, it's going to get even worse. And so for us to constantly dig to uncover evil, the question that I would have is why? What are you going to do with that information? How is that information going to help you? Not just in this earth realm, this mortal realm that we live in, but more importantly, how does this knowledge, this information going to help you from an eternal standpoint? And it's okay to get it from a mortal standpoint, but you have to put it in its perspective. Yeah, if there's some things that we can do to change it, then great. Let's by all means do that. But if there's not anything that we can do to change it, let's not get so bogged down and focused on that we start losing our eternal perspective.
I mean, I can understand a perspective of not wanting to consume yourself with knowing all the atrocities of the world, because I can understand that can become a very bleak existence. But I mean, even when we talk about the crucifixion of Christ, I mean, I'm sure we both agree that was horrible. But to not know it may put you in a position to not understand why it was necessary. And so perhaps when you are delving into it, and I think this is probably something that you said that maybe should be highlighted a little bit more, and asking yourself why, make sure that you do something good with what you gather. I got to think about the film Origin. I don't know if you ever went and got a chance to see it. But it's based on a treatise, and it delves into, again, racial and certain socio classes, or essentially she called it the caste system. And in that, she's highlighting how people that were perceived below, and she used the Holocaust, I think there was some genocide in India, and of course, use slavery here in the United States. she's highlighting how not only is this something that government has used repeatedly in the past to ensure that there is a hierarchy, but it's also something people gravitate to because they still like the idea that I'm better than someone else. And if we don't study that and then share it with others, so that again, we're not repeating this, and there's this understanding that, yes, you might have been taught that Black bodies are worse than, are, inferior to white bodies. So then let's take the origin of that. And so now you can understand how that's false. If we're not teaching that, then I don't think we correct the stereotypes, or we correct this ideology that's wrong, that one group is better than the other. So I do think having an understanding of that information can lead to good. But I agree that if you're just digging for the purpose of knowing without doing anything with it, then, it could put you in a bleak place.
But how do you shield yourself against that? Because the reality is that the more you uncover, the more evil that you uncover, the more that evil impacts you negatively. Example, case in point, I have friends who said they can't watch 12 Years a Slave or Roots or movies like that because once they come out of there, they're angry at every white person that they see at this point. They're like, I don't even watch that kind of stuff. And so if you know that information, acquiring that information is either going to be toxic or have the propensity to be toxic to you, why would you ingest it? And it's because you're like, I just can't help it. There are people who I know are now looking at the what was that, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then there's another couple other chapters of the Bible. I forgot what, the Ethiopian Bible or something like that. There's some book
There have been
chapters
so
that,
many lost chapters. I'm just like,
yeah,
okay.
there's so many lost chapters. And so when people uncover that information, you're like, oh yeah, this is good information to have. Now we got even more information. And yeah, it's more information, but what are you going to do with it? Because unfortunately, I see so many people who get that stuff and they let it undermine the veracity of what you already have. And then they start questioning, well, this Bible was translated by King James, and King James had his own motives and leaving certain parts out and X, Y, and Z. I don't know if I can even trust the Bible now because there are so many parts that were missing from it. And so I think that our quest for information serves no greater purpose other than to separate us further from God. It's the irony of it is that I think what initiates it is for us to be omniscient like God. But the reality of it is the more that we acquire, the further it draws us from God.
I don't agree with the more we acquire, the further it draws us. Because one, I think God also gives us information. I think He also puts us in a position to understand something better, so you can either better understand Him, or better understand His people, or better understand the world in which we live in and how it is a sinful world. And so in that, you need to draw closer to Him or be consumed by the sin of the world. And so I think the focus should be on what are you going to do with this information? Because even when you talk, I'm one of those that I don't like really watching like a Rosewood 12 is, but I've seen it, but I don't need to see it anymore. But I do think it's important because one, you see the resilience of us. Two, you see the history of why, again, there are a lot of systemic racist policies and practices that continue on to this day. But also, I would even hope for white people that you have a little bit more humanity in watching what happened, because you might have been fed a history, because we see how Florida and similar states are like, well, we don't want white people to feel bad, so maybe we should take some of this out. Well, it's important to understand some of this information so you understand why things are the way they are currently, and we do not go back to that place. But I also think that can also draw you closer to God, depending on, again, how you are reviewing it and your mentality going into it.
Yeah, but information is a wild card. You don't know what it's going to uncover. But once the cat's out the bag, I mean, once you've learned something, you can't unlearn it. And so the question is how do you know in advance what the impact is? How do you control that narrative? How do you present that narrative and say, hey, this is information. These are the things that we're going to learn from it, X, Y, or Z. And you can present it that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to receive it that way.
I mean,
And
I can't, control how you receive it. But if I, no more than I can tell you, okay, Jesus is my savior. Now I can't force you to accept him. All I can do
yes, you
is
can.
present you. No,
You
I
got
can't. I
it.
can't
You're
force
not. That's because you're not a white evangelical.
you. You're right. I'm white
I'm
conservatives
sorry,
are
everybody.
anything.
Not no
Which,
offense to anybody.
and maybe it's with quick side when you brought up, oh, there's a rumor that he's gay, and Shannon was like, there's the same rumor with Lindsay that Laura Loomer is perpetuating. Does he need to get on the live? But nonetheless, it was a quick, insert of humor. But going back to this, again, I just feel like if God is giving you this information, and again, I'm also like, in terms of how to make sure you receive it correctly, I think we need to lower our expectations of the world. I don't think you need to go into anything thinking that something is perfect and then have your mind blown when you realize actually your parents were plantation owners. I mean, and that to me is, I just think it's important to know some of that truth. Now, I can't control your reaction to it, but I do think we have to learn how to, again, to your point, better react to information when it comes to us so that, again, we don't spread it like the cats and dogs thing and it creates harm and chaos for an entire community.
So, question for you then: does God give us that information, or does God let us have access to that information?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, it can definitely prevent us from getting information. And I do think he does protect us in some instances. I mean, I've been blessed that I've never in my household seen abuse, but he's made it clear that, hey, you do need to know that it exists. And I think it's good that I do know that. So not only am I grateful for my household, but also that I can be more humble and empathetic to a household that was not similarly, raised. So, I mean, I do think it's a mixture of both. I think he allows us to see something just like he allowed Adam to eat that fruit and pretty much dismantle humanity. But I do think he also gives access to stuff and says, hey, are you ready to take it or not? I mean, I think David is a good example of that. He told him, you're going to be the king. But in that fugitive state, he becomes, access to a lot of things that perhaps if he was immediately given the kingdom, he would not have known about.
This is going to sound really dense of me, and I know it's going to sound really dense of me, and I'm going to get criticized probably for saying
Oh,
it.
what else is new?
But I don't think that God really wants us to know any evil. I don't think he wants to know. Philippians, what is that? Philippians 4:8 was talking about whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, just, whatsoever things are pure, of good report, lovely. All of those things, it says, think on those things. He doesn't really want us to actually think on any of the other stuff that's evil. We understand that the evil exists. I'm not saying stick your head in this sin and act like it doesn't exist. But here's what I know. I know that child sex slavery, trafficking exists, and I know it's an atrocity. It is an absolute atrocity. But I realize that these types of evils are always going to be present in the earth. Does it mean that I do nothing about it? No, it doesn't mean that I do nothing about it. It doesn't mean that I ignore that its presence there. It means that I continue to pray for those persons who are trapped in those, horrific situations. I continue to pray for them, but I can't allow myself to become emotionally engaged to the point where it distracts me from my spiritual functions and my spiritual mandates. And I but yet still I know so many people. I have several friends who are just so passionate about preventing sex trafficking. Now everything has to do with sex trafficking, Pizzagate, and now the Clintons and Biden and everybody else is involved in this. And I think if they weren't so entrenched in that information, if they didn't let that information so heavily impact them, thinking that they could somehow or another prevent it and stop it from happening, then they would not have been susceptible to some of the manipulation of other people who
But
have
is
other
justice
motives.
not good? I mean, to me, I would imagine her focus is on the justice, is on in saving the victims, which is good. And I feel like you're making it seem like her focus is on, I guess, an image of older men taking advantage of younger girls. And quite honestly, when you said that, I was like, you sound like some of these Republicans that when we have these mass shootings, they say, oh, just thoughts and prayers, but we're not going to do anything about it. No, I mean, let's do something, because doing something is also good. And if we then focus on that, then to me, that again, not only shows the light of God in us, but it also hopefully will encourage others to similarly do good for other people.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting by any means that we don't do anything about it. I think that we should understand the tools that we use for those, and which tools are going to be most effective. Um, to write a law against limiting guns and AR-15s or something like that, access to weapons,
Assault.
military not weapons of mass destructions, but these high powered, machine.
Machetes just.
I mean, we can legislate that all day long. We can legislate it all day long, but that's not going to provide a solution to it. In
Is
fact,
that
we
not
can.
a solution though? I mean, it may not
No,
solve
it's still going
it
to happen. It's
completely, but
still going to
it is
happen.
solution.
It'll find another way. People now get these guns, and they can manufacture such a gun using a 3D printer. A 3D printer, you can create a gun that has these same features in it. And as technology advances, we'll learn how to do more of those things around. So it's
While they're
not going to
learning,
stop it.
there may be one or two lives that were saved while they were, learning how to do it for the next one. And Bill Clinton posted, and I understand there's some bias there, but he posted when he banned assault rifles that crime went down. Now, to your point, that isn't to say that had he not, crime still would not have gone down, but there is nonetheless a perhaps at least understanding that, hey, I addressed it,
Yeah.
and then there was some change. Now, I'm not disagreeing that, hey, people will still be evil. I agree that that will still happen. But, I just don't like the idea that, well, I mean, it's still going to happen. So let's not get all
No, I would never.
into
I
that.
would never. I would never advocate that. I would never advocate that. I'm saying understand when you fight your battle, you have to understand which weapons you're using and the limitations of each of those weapons. There are limitations. We have the weapon, fortunately, living in a democracy. We have the weapon of being able to exercise the levers of democracy and vote. And so that's one weapon. But we have to understand that that's limited. That's only going to accomplish so much. And then we also have our spiritual weapon. Our spiritual weapon is through prayer and through ministering the gospel. And that's effective for changing some people, but it's not going to be all encompassing, because it's not going to save. We're not going to save everybody. Not everybody is going to accept the sacrifice of Jesus or the gift of Jesus and all of a sudden change their lives. There's still going to be evil in this earth. And so my problem is that when people get too much information and they just gorge themselves on one particular information, it clouds their objectivity about certain things, and it makes them more vulnerable to manipulation. And it's why, because the more atrocious the information, the more evil the act is, the more emotive you become in your response to it. And the more emotive you become to it, the less rational you become. The less rational you become, the more easily you are to be manipulated. And so that's why I was using that example about Pizzagate and the Bidens and Clintons, that people saying that they're all involved in sex trafficking. It's because they've gotten so passionate about the cause of preventing sex trafficking that they were able to be manipulated by a political motive to just fabricate some things up and say, well, the Clintons are involved in this too, so you need to hate the Clintons too. And so, but the person who actually planted that seed basically could care less about the Clintons, could care less about whether you're deceived about it. What they want to do is they want to solicit your political support for their agenda. And so, whatever story they make up that can impact you, because you now become so emotional about all this information you consume, it now makes you vulnerable. And I think we should watch information and put information in its proper perspective, because if not, it really consumes us.
So what I'm hearing you say is, perhaps again going back to expectations, keep your expectations low. Don't sit here and think you're going to save the world. But if you at least save one person, then consider it a win, and don't be so consumed. Well, that's not enough though, because it's still an issue. Well, I mean, it may not be an issue for you to solve completely, but it at least was an issue for you to address in the moment.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing.
I'll concur with that a little bit, but I realize that you're not. Yes, do realize you're not going to save the world. That's not going to happen. That's a fallacy in the first place. But also realize that even less effective than your witness is your legislation. Is legislation, and
I
so
mean, legislation is effective, but yeah, I guess your ability to do it on your own. I mean, you're going to need a team. But I mean, legislation is, because we saw in California when they raised the minimum wage to $20 for restaurants. Oh, that had an effect. Now, both good and bad, I'm sure. But yeah, because I get, as we go into this election, I don't want people to think, and I know you made sure to say it very clear, do vote. But I don't want people to think, well, I mean, here I am in New York. It doesn't matter what I vote, it's going to go blue. No, no, no. You still vote. It's still important.
now I will say that I'm saying when it doesn't matter is from an eternal standpoint. I'm saying, so I never want us to lose our eternal perspective pursuing a mortal objective. Now, granted, there are some mortal things that we just have to do while we're living on this earth. We have to do these things. And so you have to get out and vote for Kamala Harris. I'm just kidding. But
I'm not.
vote for whoever you feel so compelled to do. But even if you're voting for another person, don't think that you're voting your religion and your faith or anything like that, because it's not. It's totally unrelated. The Pope came out this past week and was like, you're basically voting for the lesser of two evils, because both of them say that they're for life and have policies that are actually against
You
life.
see some irony in the Pope, the Catholic Church, about government being evil.
That, take it with a grain of salt. But you know what? Truth is truth, regardless of who speaks it. It can be spoken from an ass, from a from a
I was gonna
donkey,
say,
It's still truth,
yeah,
though.
yeah. But I mean, don't leave falsities unchecked, because they can be taken as truth and they're not. And it's extremely hurtful, or it could be extremely harmful to a community of people.
But I'm concerned. I'm concerned mostly about how harmful information can be to a community that values the free expression and free delivery of or dissemination of information, because there are no guardrails on it. And when there are no guardrails on it, we know how quickly evil or bad information spreads, but the correction takes so much longer to reach its target, and the target is even much smaller. The target audience is much smaller. And so when we live in a society that values free speech, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression, we are that much more vulnerable to self-destruction, because we consume more information, more and more information. And all that an enemy of this state would need to do is just keep feeding in false information or divisive information. And there's no way that we can verify it, because I laugh at people when they say, hey, I did my own research. You did your research on the internet, and that internet is just giving you more of what you believe anyway, because it's figured out what you already believe.
Can we at least say depend on the source? Because I'll imagine there are some sources that may be more credible than the other. But I would also say it's important to balance, because for me, if you're not making sure you're consuming as much about Christ, as much about scripture, it's very important. I think one of the scriptures says, hey, memorialize this in your heart, because I do think God is aware that, hey, what you will be presented with, whether you like it or not, is evil. And so you need this to ensure that, one, you can discern what to do with this information, and two, so that you aren't consumed or find yourself worshiping this information. Because I think that's what you're kind of getting to is, hey, it can be a form of worship. And in that, not only does that, to your point, then put us further away from God, but it also distracts us from whatever ministry or obedience to God that he's asking us to do. But I do think that, I mean, we see in the Bible, he does use evil to also share his messages. And so if we're not ensuring that what we are also consuming is something that is good, then yeah, I agree with you that you're definitely setting yourself up to fall into what you consume.
Amen. Well, I want to let you know this conversation is continued in the new book, Deceived, The Poison Fruit of Evangelicalism by Dr. Mark Williams. Coming soon.
Well, and on that shameless plug. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys have been commenting, because I definitely want to see what you have to say. And if you want to say, "Look, listen, Dr. Williams, I don't want to consume this information in your book." It's one less piece
I'm
of
going to pray for
I
you.
want to consume.
I'm going to pray for you.
By all means, let me know. But nonetheless, we definitely want to hear what you guys think. Make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you're following us on YouTube, and make sure you catch a repeat of this episode on Star Radio. So until next Saturday, have a blessed week.